They need the state, and they need stupid politicians who misuse the state power, the monopole of power of states, to realize their ideas. And WHO is setting norms. It's setting the ICD codes. What is a disease? You only have a disease when the disease has an ICD code. And like this, they can manipulate the whole society global-wide.
Greetings, I'm delighted today to be with Wolfgang Wodarg, who is the author of False Pandemics, Arguments Against the Rule of Fear. Now, some of you may be familiar with Dr. Wodarg. We were together in 2021 for our first interview, and we recently met in Austria. Well, I say recently, it's probably several months ago now, at one of our many conferences that we've hosted over the last few years in order to try and make sense of what's been happening. And when I first spoke to Wolfgang, this book was only available in German, so I'm delighted to have the English copy here. My German was okay at school, but not enough to read the comprehensive nature of a book like this. So I'm glad to have the English copy here. And we'll, of course, be talking about the book, but we'll also talk about the reasons for the book and why this was important and why you published it. And now, in 2023, coming up to 2024 almost now, lots more people are starting to look at the situation and ask questions about what happened during the COVID chapter. So if you would you mind just telling us a little bit what was your motivation, firstly, for writing this book?
Yes, so in the beginning of 2020, I was watching what's going on in China, and then because I was rather experienced with the birds flu, the swine flu, and all those trials with trying out pandemics by the WHO, I was suspicious from the beginning, and then I tried to find out what's going on in China, what's going on in Europe, and what's going on worldwide. Is there really something, or is it only the test that is spreading, or what are they doing? And I found out that there is nothing dangerous going on, but there is some theater going on. The theater in China was very obvious. It was like a ballet, how they tried to disinfect the dirt in the streets. It's so ridiculous. It was really ridiculous what was going on there for me as a specialist for hygiene. So, and then I looked at all the data, whether when someone's getting ill or not. I looked it up in China. I looked it up in Germany, and all the monitoring we have. There are monitoring, counting the respiratory diseases each week. And so there you can easily see whether they get more or not. They didn't get more. There was nothing to be seen. So I said, I have to do something. And I came out and would try to warn the people. And I found out that the whole thing was always worsening, that they made this lockdown then. And I got really furious about that, because it was such a crime to do it. And so I had to I recognized they try to frighten people. They try to frighten people with all they can. They said it's more dangerous than ever, and you have to have no contact with other people and so on. And this is why I wrote the book. I wrote the book, and for each person to have a basis to rationally look around what's going on and to understand what's going on, and to understand also this misleading informations we got from the news. And it was a new thing that we could not relate to different sources of news. Normally there were contradicting sources of news, and you had to find out what you think, what you believe, but now they all said the same, and this was unusual for me. And so I said, they all say the same lies, and they all want to frighten the people. And this is why I wrote my book. And I think I explain for lay people, for everyone, that you can understand, and that you stop being afraid of what you hear in the television and hear in the radio. And this was the motive. And then during my work on the book, all those things came out with Davos and with the World Economic Forum, and with all this, with all what is behind. It's such a grip on our political systems, such a grip on the public money, such a big corruption taking place, and the corruption of science, which was for me very astonishing. I knew that science was corrupted already before. The pharmaceutical industry always corrupts scientists. They always did it. But this amount of pressure on universities, on institutions, and this was new. And so the political view on what was going on for me was very interesting too, and I wrote about it in my book too, because I was 15 years I was politician in the German Bundestag, and I always was working on health topics, and I was also the rapporteur for the German Bundestag for everything coming from Brussels, from the European Union, when it was about health. So I know Brussels very well. I knew all the discussions about privatizing more and more of the health system, of all health systems, and of abandoning the idea of sustainability, not sustainability, but subsidiarity. The idea of subsidiarity, that health is something for the national state and European Union has nothing to do with it, has to do with the trade. And they try to more and more occupy the health systems in Europe and to unify them and to set norms. And setting norms is the leverage with which everything is now. They try to do it by the WHO on a global level now, and this is what the WHO always tried, but it sometimes was ridiculous when they just changed the definition of pandemics. This I experienced with the swine flu. It was obvious in April. They suddenly say, "Oh no, people needn't die. It needn't be a serious disease. No, just a new virus spreading around the world." And this is how they get the pandemic alarm, just by changing the definition. And so I knew how they do it, and I knew also when they changed the norms for cholesterol in blood and so, and just to have some new patients now. If you change the cholesterol value in the blood from 240 to 200 milligram per deciliter, then you have more than 80% more patients, and you double the market with this trick. And WHO is setting norms. It's setting the ICD codes. What is a disease? You only have a disease when the disease has an ICD code, and they made new ICD codes. They made the post-COVID ICD, and they define what it is. And I think this is you have to understand this function of norm setting, and WHO is misusing this extremely for its sponsors. And this is what I have experienced 10 years ago, and this is what I experience now in an extreme way.
Yes, and this is why you were originally one of our most sought after guests. Actually, we worked very hard to get your details so we could get you on the show, because this sadly isn't your first rodeo, and your combination of political experience, but obviously as a scientist first and foremost, gives you a very holistic view on the situation. But you had previously, what we found when I first started getting skeptical around this is I actually found some of your original articles and papers and some of the cases that you put forward against previous pandemics, and I thought, well, this is to me, what I read from what you were looking at was happening all over again. It really felt like, from what I was examining, from the hysteria and everything you've just talked about, this kind of how almost like the axioms of the past, the norms of the past were thrown out of the window and redefined. And for people hearing the idea that the definition of the pandemic was redefined, the reality, you can hide something off Google, and Google have done a good job of hiding things on their search engine, but you can't hide it from the Wayback Machine. So the Wayback Machine, you go on the Wayback Machine and you can literally look at two different versions of the WHO's website, and you can see them side by side. Yet despite this, fact checkers would publish, this is false information. It's like you can literally go on the website and see it for yourself. So there is no denying it, and they obviously create narratives around it to try and justify it. But I think this is part of the, I look at it, that's part of the culture of fear making. And you've touched upon three levels, really: the culture of fear, the business and industry of fear, and then the politics of fear. And there are three different levels, I think, that have played out over the course of the last 3 years. And I think at the heart of it is this paradigm of fear that predates COVID. And I think your previous work on this, looking at previous pandemics, and I actually made a list of the pandemics that you or epidemics that you referenced in your book that you'd examined, and it's too long for us to go through. So it's not, it's not like you're looking at this for the first time and saying, scratching your head and saying what's going on. You've seen patterns prior to COVID that seemingly have played out again today.
I think this all those those pandemics they tried out, they had different purposes. This was sometimes it was because they wanted to have the field where they can experiment with new drugs, like with Ebola, where they let this outbreak go to have enough ill people for clinical studies. It was a crime. It was horrible. And so they did with other diseases too. And then they had this one with Tamiflu. They had this for selling drugs, and then selling vaccines with the swine flu. So this were always different profiteers from those maneuvers of the WHO. But what's going on now it's much more serious, because they try to globalize everything, and they misuse our caring for health, which is a very serious thing for everybody. They just occupy this care, this idea of caring for our health or for security. They occupy this to dominate the decisions of all nations globally. They want to tell us when we are endangered. They want to tell us what we have to do. They even want to tell us how we can find out that we are endangered, with which test. And like this, they can manipulate the whole society global wide. And this is a very bad story. And what they at the same time do, they occupy our dictionaries. They give new meanings to words we used to use. So, for instance, I looked up, and some days ago, I looked up fear-mongering, what it is. Fear-mongering. And I knew that it's something, how the pharmaceutical companies, how they sell their drugs. They make us afraid to sell their drugs. We have something against what you're afraid of. And this was fear-monger. But if you now look to the Oxford Dictionary, you find another example. You find fear-mongering is when somebody says that those vaccines are dangerous. Mm. They just switch it around, and they use the good expressions we are used to use. They just give them a new frame. They frame everything new, and like this, they reprogram our brains, which is a very, very severe thing and very important. We have to be aware of that, to recognize what they are doing with us. So if all those good ideas of protecting the environment, of subsidiarity, to doing the easy things at home, and only when you need something more complicated, when you need help for something more complicated, then the next level is at stake. So all this, the subsidiarity, they occupied it. They say, yes, it's a good thing. And they use it to install their global systems that you can have in Africa and everywhere. You can have this subsidiarity. You can organize yourselves, but in the same time they install control. They have the ID 2020 they want it worldwide, and they want to punish us if we don't obey, if we don't do what they think is good for environment. And we see what they think is good for our environment. They sell us nonsense now. They sell us electric cars, which are such a big sin for environment, and they sell us such machines to climate our houses, which is a real big market, and we know that this will be a disaster. And so they sell us many things. They make monopoles, and they always tell us it's for something good. You will live better when you do that. You have to do it for environment. You have to be solidary. Yeah, there has to be solidarity. If you don't do it, you will be excluded. And they use this. They use all our good ideas. They use just for propaganda, for their grip on power and grip on money, on our money. This is what we experience. And you must be very blind not to see it. Or you must look television each day. Then maybe, yes, you are reprogrammed.
Yeah, I mean, I described it as the coercive hijacking of the common good, because, the reality is most humans deep within themselves have this desire to do the right thing, and
Yes,
that's good. that's
yes,
not
that's
that's not not
sure.
a bad thing. But it's also the hijacking of community spirit, which creates that sense of
Yes.
solidarity. But I think what's different from your investigation in 2009 to where we are in 2020 to 2023 is we kind of reached this, because 2009 was also post-banking crisis. So we had this kind of centralization of power around the financial industry at that time as well. We've obviously seen the radical escalation, or acceleration rather, of digital technologies and the proliferation of mobile technologies and social media during that time. It's hard to think back, 10, 15 years ago and
Yeah.
look at, the early stages of social media and just how widespread it's become now. So we've got this kind of almost peak of globalization and centralization at the same time as the peak of mobile technologies, at the same time as kind of a peak understanding of behavioral science and using behavioral techniques in conjunction with things like big data, which have become available since the emergence of the web and digital technologies. So all of the mechanisms were in place to really capitalize on this situation. And we created a small documentary in September 2020, which kind of laid out what we thought would happen. And lo and behold, almost everything that we set out in September 20 has played out. And we also had some of the early documentation around how the vaccine manufacturers, or big pharma, were going to communicate about how the vaccines were going to roll out. And we were shocked at the manipulation that was going to be used. And it
Yes.
was all of the things we touched upon and more around the common good, protecting others, doing the right, like the language of doing the right thing became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right, the language, the manipulation, but ultimately at the core of it, what's the same as 2009 is the drive of commercial interests and kind of amalgamation of powers, which we see after the advent of any any crisis. So we see this, whether it's, we've just had 9/11. We saw all kinds of security protocols rolled out, again, centralization of power. And it's, Naomi Klein has written about this, about how this crisis culture is just enabling commercial interests and centralization of power, and it's kind of run away on steroids during the course of COVID.
Yes, and in my book, I try to speak about all this, and I also tried how we can avoid to be victims of this development. And I think there is something we have to do the opposite of globalization, which is important, because what they try to do is to occupy communication. Communication is not only speaking or not only the media, it's also the money. Money is a way of communicating. And we need it for exchanging our possibilities, our goods. And so this is a means of communication. And they also want to have the grip on it. And they misuse it and they give it new meaning. And they try to monopolize the meaning of money. And we have to go one step back, I think, because this, whether you can live somewhere and be calm and rely on the structures you live in depends a lot on transparency, that you can understand what people do, whom you entrusted something you cannot do yourself. So we live in a society where we need so many specialized people who know better in many things, because there are so many technical possibilities we can improve our life with. So we need specialists, and we always entrust something, what we need, to specialists. But the problem is that we have to understand and to see in time when they misuse our trust for some secondary interests. And this corruption, this is what is now growing, has grown very fast in the last 3 years. It is not a corruption of single persons. It is an institutional corruption. They take over our institutions, our law, our courts. They take over the science, the institutes. They take over the administration. They take over the governments. They have the global young leader put in all. They are proud that they took it over. They sent their people to all governments. And they had the ministers and they had the bosses of governments in many, many countries. This is what Mr. Schwab is boosting himself. He said, yes, we succeeded to put them everywhere. So, and they did. And they prepared this for many years. And we didn't think someone could be so evil just to cheat us, us believing in democracy, in equal, all different, all equal. We have equal rights for everyone. There's no dictatorship. Would never be allowed. Nobody would have said, yes, this is a quite good thing if there is some totalitarian system which can control us all and regulate everything. No, we have never thought that. They succeeded with many people, even with the majority in some countries, to get their ideas into the heads of the people by misusing the media and just transporting their propaganda. And this is we have to learn that it's so easy to do this. We have to find out how we can have the new society, if we want, which is able to see this in time and to say, no, you're on the wrong way. We don't allow this. So, and I think this has to do with that we understand the system we live in. This has to do with transparency. That has to be, if we entrust something, there has to be, they are responsible to tell us what they do with this, with the power we gave them. And we have to insist that we want to know. So we have to work a lot more to find out in time when someone is doing the wrong things with our power. And this has to do with the size of a society. So many things can be done in small societies. So the care for old people, the care for children, the education of children, the security in our towns. This is all things where the state has nothing to do. You don't even need a nation for that. You need the regional people who organize, and they must have the money for it. So in Scandinavia, they have, for instance, they take 60% of the taxes are local taxes. And the communities take the taxes and they supply the people with what they need. And I think this is a very good way if you decentralize the tax system, if you decentralize the responsibility for deciding about education, about care, about primary health care with doctors and with nurses working together in the region. And with all this, you can have, I think we just think everything is getting better when it's getting bigger. And this is wrong because it's getting intransparent when it's getting bigger.
Yes, there's a brilliant book called Small is Beautiful, and it kind of and there's some brilliant business books written about kind of boutique businesses, and there is a joy and love of the kind of independent retail with small shops, and it really offers kind of, and what you're touching on now is really part of the solution. But I think a big part of the solution, to me, decentralization, localization, and levels of subsidiarity, which you've touched upon, which simply...
we have to try out. We don't know how exactly to do this, but we have to have the freedom in our regions to do it differently and to exchange experience and to publish and to struggle. Our way is the best. No, our way is better. Doesn't matter. We can do it differently. And we have to have a transparent system of exchange of knowledge about this.
Well, the transparency part is a major component as well, because so much is cloak and dagger. It's out of sight, out of mind, and it comes back to the global nature of a lot of the kind of. I mean, agendas make it. The word agenda is triggering, but the reality is we are facing a number of agendas, and there's the C40 cities coalition, which is driving this kind of ULEZ, which we're experiencing in the UK with kind of 15-minute cities and driving, vehicles off the road. And it's not to say that we don't have a problem with pollution. And, the climate situation there's got many parallels with COVID, which I know for some people is triggering because, they're deeply passionate about the environment. But you'll notice with climate, they don't talk about environment. They don't talk about nature or pollution. It's all about control once again. And it's this.
I have nothing against 50-minute cities if there are no more than 5,000 inhabitants.
Well, yeah, but also the fact that the local governance structure doesn't say you can't go from street A to street B and you have to go via this road. It's the kind of technocratic authoritarian. Because
the good thing there is that they need soldiers and policemen to force us to obey them.
yes.
And soldiers and policemen, they want a good life too. They want to live free and as in a democracy too. And so they need the states to pressure the people, to make pressure on the people to follow their stupid ideas. They need the state, and they need stupid politicians who misuse the state power, the monopoly of power of states, to realize their ideas. And this, because we have elections still, and we can still choose our politicians, our representatives in parliaments and in public, we just have to stand for it. We have to say, no, we don't want such people who do such things. We want to control you. And if we vote for you, our representative, you have to tell us, each week you have to tell us what you do and why you do it. And we want to follow what you do. And we want to control it because you have our power and you're using our power. And we have to be proud of that. We are the ones who have the power, the legitimate power. And those other ones who try to just take it away, to steal our power for their private interests.
It's so tricky. Yeah, it's tricky because on one hand, we've had politicians and authorities who are kind of micromanaging our lives. So in my view, I don't want it to flip the other way, that the public are then micromanaging the politicians. I mean, it feels like that right now because, but really we want a shift in values and a shift in culture so that you can have trusted representatives. But right now, I think there's almost like a belief system in many economies or territories that we just change the color of the flag of the party that's in charge and all will be well. But of course, that won't. No. The global and centralized interests will still continue. They'll still get lobbied.
Yes.
And there are some characters coming forward that I think have the fortitude and understanding of that mechanisms. We've got Robert Kennedy Jr. in the US, regardless of what people think about him. He's clearly fighting that technocracy in a way. But really, it's one nation, and it's a pretty powerful nation. But to me, it feels like we need a political counterculture in the major economies.
Yes. I tell you one thing. They played a big trick when they allowed democracy. Those kings and all those people who said yes, now there is democracy. When they just took a step back and they let us play democracy, they established parties. They were very happy that there were parties. And your party is something where the single politicians is no longer responsible because the party takes over what is to be done. And the party is in between the people and the government. And this makes the whole thing completely intransparent. And it's also a big field of corruption. The lobby, this is those people going for your interests if you can pay. Lobby is always someone who has money now, the professional lobby. I mean, it's not when the people go to the politicians and lobby for themselves. No. I mean, the lobby industry with psychologues, with thousands of psychologues, sociologues and statistics. And and if you can pay them, they go to the politicians. The politicians are overwhelmed. They obey. And if we leave away the party, and if the lobbyist has to come to the constituency in public sessions and speak to the parliamentarian, the representative of this constituency, in all the audience can listen what they say. And if there is some reason to do what this lobbyist wants, they can understand it, all of them. And the politician can do it, can help him. And so, but we have to forbid professional lobbying that can only work for big money interest. This is not fair. This is just against democracy. We are not all equal then, although we all have the same rights. We are not all equal when you have professional lobbyists. Only those. Yes, and such systematic things we have to go them through and to have to find out what we do. And I think we should have a change in the parliamentarism. We should have a change which is abolishing parties, which does not take parties anymore. And I tell the people now in Germany, if there is the next election in Germany, ask this party where you have to choose a party still, because our laws are like that. If you ask the party, are you ready to prepare a system only for direct candidates, no more list of parties? Would you do this? Then I give you my vote. And so we have to insist that our representatives tell us what they do for us. And when you have such a system, and each constituency has its representative in parliament, you don't need to have elections in the whole nation in the same time. They can recall when they don't trust their representative anymore. They can say, no, we have a new election, and they can send a new one. And this would make an exchange in parliament, a continuous exchange of representatives. There will be no fraction, no political group. And they will have to find each other, those people with the same ideas, and if they want to promote something, they can do it, and they have to report at home why they do it. So I have a dream. You see?
Yes, yeah. I share a dream as well, and I've put a great deal of thought into political transformation. I really have, and it's so tricky, even with a direct form of democracy. And I think there's almost like a rose-tinted view on democracy on the basis that if you look at its origin, but even if you go to trace back to its origins in Greece, it's like the oligarchy had democracy. So what kind of democracy is that? And of course, things have changed since then. But even in my house, like I thought, even if I was to assess the needs of my street, the needs would be so different across our street. But even down to my household, my wife and I, my son, we've all got different needs. So to try and take a level of subsidiarity, localization, as well as looking at the aggregates. But I think fundamentally it's about really thinking about, to me, politics should be about enabling human flourishing. It should be about helping to provide the conditions for people to live a good life. If I was to get philosophical on it. And that then looks at some of the central components that affect us all, education and healthcare and all the various elements that create a healthy community in the environment, but these aren't. It doesn't feel like that ever is the priority of a nation state. It feels like we just need a total flip upside down of the whole model, let alone the mechanics of it. But go back to first principles and say, what is the purpose? Because there's no surprise to see there's a rise in anarchism, kind of agorism as well. People looking, saying we want to strip away the nation state altogether. And I understand that sentiment. But if you've got nothing else to replace it with, well, you'll probably get more of the same, as we've seen when great dictators get toppled. It doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes. But it is, I think this is a time, as you touched upon earlier, a time for great experimentation. And that's informed experimentation. Entrepreneurship and innovation is taking calculated bets on future outcomes. But so I do think this is the time for change, but
there's a good knowledge about. I think it was Professor Werner who did it. He made an analysis of how many banks are in a region, how many local banks do you have, and he found out that there is a relation between the number of banks and the productivity of a region. The smaller the banks and the closer they are to the entrepreneurs, the higher the productivity. And when you monopolize the banks, when you have only big banks, they don't know what is done with the money anymore. They cannot follow what is the productivity. They cannot know whether they should invest or not. They don't know what is done with the money. It's just speculation. And so the money as a means of communication also has to be locally, there has to be local responsibilities for it, and and transparency with it. And you entrust money if you lend money, and you have to find out what is done with the money. So next time you can say no. So all this is the money, but it's with many things. It's the same thing with quality in care. Now, if you have a big care enterprise, you buy some institutions to make a certification that you have good quality. So you buy specialists, and they come and they get paid that you get such a paper that you have good quality, which doesn't say anything for the people. And so it costs a lot of money. We have 25% of mistrust investment in care, for instance, and it's not productive at all. So we could do it really better, and I think people can learn this. We have to speak about it. We have to make many sessions and have to try, and you have to visit those people who try out.
Yes. I mean, I think many of the answers are out there. I've just watched it. I've mentioned it on several podcasts because it's captivated me so much. There's a documentary on Netflix at the minute which looks at the blue zones around the world, which is a blue zone is a term that's used to describe a location where there's a high degree of concentration of centenarians, people who have reached 100 years plus. And they look at the habits, the environment, the nutrition, and all the different patterns that comprise. And no surprises, there are things there that you can materially observe. So it's not, in many cases, it's not like we have to completely start with a blank piece of paper, because there are answers already out there. And there are also localized solutions that are starting to grow from the grassroots that we can learn from and share. But it's almost like we've been entwined into the mentality of one size fits all and centralized, because people are looking for like the thing that they can take from over here and copy it. And I think there is modeling and looking at principles and methodologies, but the whole point of localization is to say, well, it might work for you there, but our culture is very different. We need to adapt it. And I was talking to an expert in a guy called Ian Banyard, who does a lot of work around nature connection. And he was explaining how an oak tree always looks like an oak tree, but where the acorn falls determines how the oak tree grows, because the soil quality might be different, the environment, the weather, climate might be different. So even though it looks like an oak tree, it will be radically different it could be radically different from the oak tree that it came from. And I think that's the thing about localization, is you adapt to the local circumstances rather than try and find the globalized ones, because that's what we're facing right now, is the homogeneity of everything, which to me is like the ultimate dystopia of one size fits all politics, one size fits all culture.
We have experienced such a thing, that there is something good, like the Christian model, like Jesus gave us a model with love. And there was this church using this model to dominate the whole world. What came out was the opposite of what Jesus wanted to tell. They just use it for power, misuse it for. This is what they always do, and this is what they do now again. They give us all the nice things. What we all agree of for environment, we all agree that there should no discrimination at all. We all know it, and they misuse this to discriminate you if you don't take their shots.
Yes, or conform to whatever viewpoint or current ideology is the go-to. So I want to take a back step a little bit, because I think there's going to be two types of people who are watching this. There's multiple types of people, obviously, but there's two categories of people maybe watching this who have looked at what's happened during COVID. They think this doesn't make sense to me. And your book really, it really does lay out a lot of the chapter by chapter. It lays out the problem. So if you're skeptical about the idea that because we've jumped straight into corporate interest, but this lays out everything. The history of pandemics, the testing, and the various steps that kind of led to with the evidence of what we face. So for a lot of people who are they've looked at what's happened in the last couple of years, and we've jumped straight to the corporate interest. There's a lot of steps obviously in between there. So for the people who are skeptical about, particularly those who have lost loved ones during the last couple of years, or they haven't. That they've believed the stories they've seen on the newspapers, etc. What's your message to them who are just starting to say, well, maybe there wasn't something right? What would be your message to the people who perhaps haven't yet really looked at some of these things that we touched on today?
I'm afraid with all those people a little bit who got the shot, who got several shots. I pity many people who. And I know many people who regret it now, who are victims of propaganda, or who are forced to take the shot because they need to work and earn money for their families. and I know that the shots, if they really, we don't know what was in all shots, because there were different contents in the vials, and this was not a constant thing. So many people have good luck, and others have bad luck. And if you get the shot, if you're a strong person with big muscles and you get the shot without aspiring, you would get it into your veins. It's horrible. You will have immediately a heart failure or myocarditis or something like that. And such cases happen. It's a very, very sad thing. They are victims of lies, those people. And we have to help their families, and we have to help those people who are paralyzed now, who have neurological disorders. And there are we know that the spike protein, if it's presented in our endothelia of the capillaria or of the low pressure system everywhere in the body, there is time enough to go into the endothelia, and then spike protein is presented, and our immune system is just destroying those cells we need in the inside of our blood vessels, and there will be clots, and there will be damage, and it's going directly into the brain. 1/5 of the blood is pumped into the brain by our heart. And so there is a lot of people suffering now, and there are many people now who tell, yes, we can help you. I can sell you this. I can sell you that. And I, as a doctor, as a specialist for internal medicine and pneumology of lung diseases, I know that, and I work for transparency, and I was very much aware of the science who was bought by the industry, and this trick that you can tell people, yes, if you buy my drug, this will cure you. It has stayed the same. It's very difficult now for those people who suffer from the injections to find out what is really helping, or what could improve their health, and what could stabilize their health. And one thing is very clear, that everything you use in your body, when you use your brain, when you use your muscles, when you move, when you walk, when you talk with people, this strengthens you. It helps you. And if your social context, it stabilizes you. You need activity to stay healthy. This is true. This is always true. This is still true. And with damages in our tissue, we know that our body is able to repair a lot. But if some brain cells are destroyed, they won't grow. I myself, I had a stroke, I had a stroke. I was semi-paralyzed, and I worked all day to train and to improve my possibilities, so that I could participate in daily life again as I did before. And it took me some years. And you can, if you train, you can repair a lot, or you can, how do you say, instead of the old rotten cells, you can activate those ones who are there, that they give more output. So you can do something for your health by being active. And there are some drugs, and they tell us those drugs, they help. We have to find out exactly in which step of this process of our body is changed by the vials, in which step it is useful to take this drug or that drug. It is so, sometimes it's a very short time slot, and if a drug is good, and 1 week after, maybe 1 month after, it is dangerous already. So this knowledge we have to try to find out, and we have to be honest while we are discussing it.
Yes,
and this is not. Many people want to earn money now.
Well,
yes, and still.
Yes, yeah, we have to be aware of the commercial interest. But I think what was beautiful during the early stages of the kind of pandemic, you had people like Dr. Pierre Corey and other doctors like yourself and doctors around the world looking at early treatment and intervention, and that knowledge began to circulate and share and be cross-checked and cross-referenced and ratified, and that was a wonderful experience that's now come to a period, I would say, of some form of consolidation. It still needs to go through a period of kind of normalization, in the sense that it gets mass adoption and acceptance, before adoption, acceptance at the very least. But I think the same will begin to happen now in the same way that there's been a consolidation of evidence around the implications of the shots, and a lot of the evidence is beginning to be shared and consolidated. And it's my hope that the treatments and protocols, because you're absolutely right, it's the same is true of the treatment of COVID, is that, as many of the doctors have shared, it's the stages following the initial diagnosis that depends on what protocols you follow. And no doubt it's the same or similar for post-vaccination.
But if you see how the doctors are rewarded when they use the ICDs WHO made, there is this post-COVID ICDs, and there you can have post-COVID, long COVID. Also, when you once had a positive PCR test, and afterwards you got ill, and then if the doctor writes down post-COVID, whether you are vaccinated, whether you got the judge your shot or not, they don't even mention it. And even the scientific work, when I saw scientific work from a multi-center study with many people who had positive PCR test, and they had a brain damage, and they tried to find out what you can do and how much brain damage there was depending on the time of the interventions and so on. They tried out to distinguish this, and they tried out to predict who will be damaged more by long COVID. And in the whole work, in the whole scientific world, all those professors, they didn't mention once whether those patients were so-called vaccinated or not, which is the same damage by the spikes. They are more dangerous when they come as spikes from your own body inside, as if they come somewhere on your mucosa from outside from some virus. And then we don't even, I don't believe there was a more dangerous virus than all the other years. I don't believe it. I very well know they constructed dangerous viruses as they construct dangerous weapons somewhere in the world, in several places. And there is a very good work now. They find some Japanese scientists, they found out that there was that even the new variants cannot be explained by what's possible in nature. The new variants are are also made artificially. And when you see this tree of Wuhan and then this many variants spreading, it's such a nonsense. The virus is always changing from every origin, not only from Wuhan. In London too, there was in 2000, there was some coronavirus which was changing and changing. You could make the same tree from London, from Berlin, and from Amsterdam. It is such a nonsense. It's such a narrative they try to impose. They try to put into our brains, and I think we can just forget virology. And we don't need to be afraid of dangerous viruses, which is so important because they have no chance in nature. A virus that kills the host
it needs the host to survive. Yes,
self-limiting.
Exactly.
Yes, and this we know each one who was working with epidemiology, who's working with hygiene, they all learned it. They've forgotten it. So don't be afraid of viruses from some lab. They try to earn money with it. They try to frighten us. And then they make some test which is positive as often as possible. And they say, this is it.
This is the difficult thing for me, because what I've said throughout this is it feels like there's, the old story of the boy cried wolf, in the sense that it says, wolf, 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 over here there's no wolf, 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 over there no wolf, and then finally says wolf, 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 and there is a wolf, and no one takes it seriously. My concern with all of this is that if there was something in the future now that was because something that's man-made doesn't have the same need to survive as something that evolves naturally from nature. This is where the terms like bioweapon come from, because it's built for a different purpose. So if something was to be manifested or escaped or purposely deployed, my concern would be that people wouldn't be ready for it, because, I think the majority of people would, as we've seen with COVID. It's very easy to create a media machine, but the skepticism, I think, is now left to such a loss of trust in institutions, such a loss of trust in expertise, is now that even loss of trust in oneself. People are really now looking, and to your point around some of the solutions to the vaccine injuries and the new corporate interests that are coming from smaller companies, the startups. But it's not to say that there shouldn't be a commercialization of it, but it's the corporatization of it and the manipulation of it that becomes problematic. So,
Yes.
how we restore trust, to me, is one of the big problems is to solve beyond this, because it's uncomfortable living in a world of low trust. And for communities to thrive, we need trust. For localization to succeed, we need trust.
It has to be rightful trust and not hope. We don't mix up hope and trust. You hope that nothing serious will happen. This is one thing. This is not trust. Trust has to be rightful. There has to be transparency when you want to have rightful trust. We have to know what is going on when you want to trust. At least you have the chance to look what they do. And then if you have the possibility to find out what they do, they know it, and they won't do bad things, because you can enter their laboratory anytime and you can find out what they do. So the condition of trust is transparency. And this is when you can hide everything. When you say it's a military thing, you can do everything and you can tell people whatever. We have the most dangerous weapons, rockets, atom bombs, and you can tell them everything because it's secret. Nobody is allowed to go into. And this is what they are misusing. This is why the Department of Defense in the US is financing the new vaccines you have to spray in your nose. Only this. And it will be also some RNAs you spray in the nose of children then. They try it out in Seattle. They gave money for it. And this, I think we have to take away this power. They have to take away the money from those institutions. And this has to be done by the people of the United States. This has to be done by the people in Europe. We have to say, no, you don't get our money for that. No, we don't vote for politicians who give money for that. And we want to change the system.
Yes, and that's where it comes back to people-orientated power. And, we regularly hear that, the people have the power, and hypothetically we do. Hypothetically we do. But in the same way that we've seen this centralization, accumulation of power, we've also seen the relinquishment of power at the local level. In the UK, somewhere between 1% and 2% of the UK population are actually members of a political party. The voting numbers are consistently moderate to low.
Yes.
So whilst these big businesses can lobby the politicians, if you're not a member of a party, you don't need, and this comes back to the bigger discussion we had earlier on, but join all the parties, just tell the same story. At least you have to, and I know what people are saying, we need to transform the system. I agree. I'm an advocate for that. But whilst we currently have this, just leaving all the conversation on the table to the lobbyists and not putting our own voice in there is only going to end in one result. It's going to be we will be the voiceless. So in the meantime, my view is we have to make our voices heard across the political paradigm to do exactly what you've just described and say enough's enough. We're not supporting this anymore. We want a new era of transparency and accountability, and ultimately trace the history of politics before it became a big machine. It was about serving the interests of the local communities, and that's where we need to return, I believe.
And it's so easy now for local communities to network. We can learn from each other. We have the internet. We can decentralize. Nevertheless, we can be connected.
Indeed. Yes, I agree. Wolfgang, we're out of time. This has been a wonderful conversation where we've kind of covered a lot of ground of some of the problems and the centralization, and looked at a lot of some ideas around the solutions. I think these conversations around the solutions are vital, and talking about centralization and how this has arisen is so important, because a lot of people see the surface level problems with the COVID response. They can see the collateral damage. They can see the harm that's been done by policy, but they haven't yet necessarily seen the mechanics that's led to that. And I think that's the conversation that we've had today that's important to help people understand that this kind of globalized centralization of power, I think, has probably reached its peak or close to its peak. It's certainly still trying to build momentum, but at the same time as that grows, the resistance is also rising. So I think this is where now as we turn to the conversation around decentralization and localization, people-led solutions, community-led solutions, that's where the inspiration can follow and the creativity can follow. Firstly, around the COVID-related problems, certainly, but then more broadly around all the areas that influence our lives. I think that's the message of hope that I would like to offer, at least.
I think it's in my book, I made something like a red line or red file, or what it is, a guideline through the possible developments and through to understand what is possible, to understand why things happen that we see now. So it's a good thing you put your legs up and you read it chapter by chapter, and yet you will have lots of ideas. You may improve my ideas, but I put them all. I offer them all in my book, and I experienced so much, and I'm dealing so long with entrusting, with corruption, with politics, with political system, with the biological system, with viruses, as a lung doctor and I was director of a public health institution also. So I know all those problems we're facing now, and I try to make something out of it that you can understand and get some orientation, that you lose your fear, and then you start thinking, what can we do now?
Indeed, thank you. And where's your preferred place to send people to get a copy of the book now? It's available at major bookstores. It's also on Amazon. But is there somewhere you'd prefer to send people to get a copy of this?
You can have there is in a web address. It is falsepandemics.com. It's in one word or with a hyphen, doesn't matter. False Pandemics, plural, falsepandemics.com. There you can find where you can get it.
Perfect. We'll put the links in the notes. Great to see you again. What a fascinating conversation. Keep up the good work. And you're one of the other, the amount of people I've known over the last couple of years who seemingly get more energized and more younger the further we go into this. So great to see you looking so vibrant and bringing your energy with us today. So thank you so much, and keep up the great work. And I look forward to our next conversation to see how things are evolved in the future. So thanks again for being with us here on the Pandemic Podcast.
Thank you for this possibility to speak again with you. Thank you.